The driveway looked the same as it did 5 years ago, cracked near the mailbox and slightly crooked where the hedge had overgrown. I sat in my car for a full minute before killing the engine, staring at the familiar front porch of the Voss family home like it was some kind of battleground. My name is Natalia Voss. I'm 34 years old. I live in Washington, D.C. These days, I work as a deputy director with the Office of Coastal Infrastructure and Security, federal level. But back here, in Fairhope, Alabama, I'm just the one who ran off to join the Coast Guard instead of doing what a good Voss kid was supposed to do: go into the family business. I rang the bell even though I still had a key. My mom opened the door with that tight-lipped smile she used when she didn't know what to say. "Natalia," she said, almost like a question. "Hey, Mom." She hesitated before stepping aside. "They're in the dining room. We started early." Of course you did. The house smelled like roast chicken and rosemary. Same centerpiece, same white china, the same laughter echoing from the dining room. I stepped in quietly, barely making a sound, and stood in the doorway while the scene unfolded. My brother, Logan, stood at the head of the table, mid-toast. "To the future of port and bay maritime logistics. I couldn't have done it without all of you." Clink, clink, clink. My father, all bluster and blazer, was beaming. "Head of logistics by 35, he said proudly. "Just like we planned." No one noticed me yet. Or maybe they did, and just didn't pause. "Nat!" Logan finally called out, a little too loudly when he spotted me. "There she is!" Every head turned. Smiles were polite, a little surprised, but never thrilled, never warm. "Come sit," my mother said, gesturing toward the empty chair. Not at the head of the table, not near Dad, not next to Logan. Of course. Dinner unfolded like I wasn't there. They talked over me, around me, about merger projections and harbor permits and expansions. I nodded, took small bites, and kept my mouth shut. Someone made a joke about Coast Guard budgets, and they all laughed. "Logan's already courting federal bids," Dad said with a wink. "If we land this coastal security contract, we're golden." I took a slow sip of water. Let the words hang in the air. They didn't know, not yet, because tomorrow I'd walk into that bid review meeting not as their little disappointment, but as the lead federal regulatory advisor who decides whether their proposal clears security compliance. They were pitching to me, but for tonight I just sat there, quiet, invisible. I let them pretend they were the only ones at the table who mattered. Let them toast my brother and brag about deals and expansions and things they thought I couldn't understand. Let them forget that I've spent the last decade studying coastal risk, rewriting port security protocols, and navigating Congress to secure disaster readiness budgets. Let them forget, because they never really knew in the first place. After dessert, my mother walked me to the door. "You didn't say much," she said quietly. "I had nothing to add," I said. She gave me that sad smile again. "Well, it was nice to see you." I nodded, then walked out into the cool night air. They had no idea what was coming. The door to my old bedroom creaked exactly the way it used to. That hadn't changed. But the rest? It was like stepping into a museum built for someone I used to be, someone they wished I still was. Trophies lined the shelf above the desk. Debate team, National Honor Society, the State Science Fair award I'd won junior year. My high school diploma was framed on the wall beside my acceptance letter to the University of Alabama. Next to it, a photo of me in a graduation cap, beaming between my parents, long before the word disappointment found its way into my father's vocabulary. What wasn't in the room? Anything from the last 12 years of my life. No pictures in uniform, no plaques from the Coast Guard, no awards for emergency response, no certificates from the Naval War College, not even a printout of the Washington Post article that called me a rising star in coastal security. I sat down on the edge of my old twin bed. The same floral quilt my mom had sewn when I was 16 still covered it, faded and stiff now. It felt like I'd been time-traveled against my will, like the version of me that wore boots and brass buttons had been erased on purpose. I leaned back, staring up at the ceiling. I remembered lying there the night I told them. I had gotten the Coast Guard scholarship, a full ride, competitive, prestigious, and I'd accepted it. My father had folded his arms across his chest. "You're throwing away a real education," he said flatly. "You've got the grades, you've got the future, and you're going to chase boats instead of running a business." I had tried to explain that I wanted to serve, that coastal response and logistics were the future, that I didn't want to push spreadsheets at Port and Bay for the rest of my life. He shook his head. "You want to waste your talent? Fine. Just don't expect applause when you come crawling back." I never did crawl back, and he never clapped. Downstairs, laughter echoed again. Logan's voice, confident, booming, always certain the room was listening. I could hear my dad chiming in. Something about logistics forecasts, about impressing the feds. I closed the door. They had boxed me up in this room, frozen me in time. They had preserved the version of Natalia they could understand, the obedient daughter with a bright future in their world. Not the one who wore a command pin, not the one who held federal clearance, not the one who would walk into Port and Bay tomorrow morning as the regulatory official with full authority to demand answers they didn't want to give. They didn't invite that Natalia into this house, but she was here now, and she was done being quiet. The Port and Bay Maritime Headquarters stood like a monument to legacy. Glass facade, brushed steel signage, manicured hedges lining the entrance. Same building I used to drive past in high school, watching men in suits stream out while Dad's voice echoed from the car radio during local business reports. This time, I walked through the front doors with a different kind of authority. My boots clicked on the polished tile floor, navy slacks crisp, blouse regulation white, badge clipped clean to my jacket pocket. The gold insignia on my lapel caught the morning light, the Coast Guard shield resting beside the federal seal of the Department of Coastal Infrastructure. The security guard at the front desk looked up. "Good morning, ma'am." I slid my ID across the glass counter. He scanned it, eyebrows lifting slightly. "You're with DCIS?" "Deputy Director Natalia Voss. I have a 9 a.m. with Executive Operations." He typed something quickly. "Yes, ma'am. Right this way. You'll be on the 8th floor. Mr. Hanley will meet you there." Elevator ride was silent except for the low hum of gears. I watched my reflection in the brushed metal walls. The same face they used to mock at the dinner table. The same hair they told me to wear down like a lady, now tied back tight beneath my service cap. When the doors opened, I stepped into a world that hadn't changed a bit. Long glass walls, frosted with the company's emblem. Hallways that smelled like mahogany and ego. A junior associate passed me and nodded quickly. "Morning." "Morning," I returned without breaking stride. Through a set of glass conference doors, I spotted him, Logan, standing at the head of a long table, clicker in hand, briefing a room of executives. His suit was tailored, posture perfect, eyes locked on the projection screen behind him. "And if we move forward with the updated coastal integration plan, we're set to meet the compliance deadline by—" He turned mid-sentence, saw me, and froze. By end of quarter." His face twitched, confused, like his brain was trying to reconcile the badge, the uniform, and the sister he hadn't thought twice about since Christmas 3 years ago. Behind him, the door opened. "Deputy Director Voss," a voice said warmly. I turned. It was Harold Hanley, Port and Bay's CEO, the man who had once handed me a company internship, and then told me not to waste it on idealism. His smile now was firm and polished. "We're honored to have you here." "Appreciate the invitation," I said. He gestured inside the room. "Everyone, this is Deputy Director Natalia Voss. She'll be overseeing federal regulatory review for the harbor modernization project." The room shifted. Postures straightened. People stood, except Logan, who still hadn't moved. My father stepped in from the other end of the room, gray-haired, sharp as ever in his navy jacket. He looked right at me, his smile flickering as his eyes registered the insignia on my collar. "You're reviewing our contract?" "Leading the compliance evaluation," I said. "This project falls under my division." You could hear the silence spread across the table like a dropped glass. I took the seat beside the CEO. My brother still hadn't sat down, and my father still hadn't blinked. Funny, I thought, how fast the room got quiet when the girl who didn't fit the business walked in with the authority to shut it down. The room was full, but it felt like there were only 3 people in it: me, my brother Logan, and my father. Everyone else was watching, silent, waiting to see how this played out. I didn't look at either of them when I sat beside the CEO. I opened my folder, clicked my pen, and started the meeting like I'd done 100 times before. "Let's begin," I said. "Today's review will focus on compliance benchmarks for Port and Bay's proposal under the Coastal Infrastructure Modernization Act, specifically Section 12.7, Harbor Logistics and Secure Integration." Logan finally took his seat, 2 spots down. He adjusted his tie and cleared his throat, but I could see the flush in his neck. He wasn't ready for this. Not for me. My father didn't say a word. He sat rigid, arms folded, eyes fixed straight ahead like he was trying to will himself into another room. The presentation resumed. A senior engineer walked us through the tech specs: sonar arrays, harbor surveillance zones, the usual. I nodded, took notes, asked a few questions about implementation risk. Nothing harsh. Not yet. Then Logan stood again, clicker in hand. "So, if we look at the projected offload times under our current plan," he said, clicking to a new slide, "you'll see we've reduced inefficiencies by over 40% using our internal logistics streamlining model." I let the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone look at me. "Mr. Voss," I said, calm and professional, "can you explain why your model contradicts the pre-submission figures you provided to the federal audit team last month?" Logan blinked. Sorry. Which figures?" I opened the folder and slid a copy across the table. Page 3. "Your own report flagged the barge intake schedule as understaffed and time inefficient. That was 6 weeks ago. Yet I don't see a revision or contingency outlined here." He picked up the page, skimmed, and stammered. "We're still finalizing that aspect. The revised metrics weren't integrated into this draft yet." "So you presented a compliance projection based on incomplete data?" He looked at our father like he wanted backup. Dad didn't move. I didn't press harder. Just kept my tone even. "I'll need a full revision by end of week," I said, flipping the page. "With a corrected throughput analysis and a clear chain of command chart for every port authority involved. You'll also need to account for federal cybersecurity layer integration. Right now, you're operating below the protocol threshold." Murmurs passed around the table. Someone scribbled notes. Harold Hanley nodded slowly. Logan opened his mouth, then closed it. His jaw was tight, but his eyes were glassy. I could tell. Part of him still believed I'd play nice. Let him slide. I didn't. "This isn't personal," I said flatly. "This is federal infrastructure. If your team can't meet the standards, we can't authorize the contract. Simple as that." He nodded stiffly. "Understood." I moved on to the next item like he wasn't my brother, just another applicant with work to do. My father finally leaned forward, hands clasped, but he still said nothing. Not even when I flagged a security gap in their drone perimeter. When the meeting wrapped, I stood calmly, collected my folder, and thanked the room. No gloating, no smirking, just business. Because I didn't come here to prove I belonged. I came here to show them I never needed to ask. I hadn't even made it to the elevator before I heard my name. "Natalia." I turned. My father was standing in the hallway outside the conference room, jaw tight, tie loosened, looking like a man trying to hold himself together in public. "Come with me," he said. He didn't ask. He never did. I followed him down a long hallway lined with framed photographs of container ships, past a boardroom named after our grandfather to his private office. When he opened the door, I saw Logan and my mother already inside. Logan was pacing. My mother stood near the window, arms crossed, face unreadable. Dad closed the door. "You've been in that job for 2 years?" he said, not even turning toward me. "2 years and you never told us?" I did tell you, I said. I sent the announcement. I mailed a copy of the appointment letter. I even called. My mother shifted. We never saw anything. No, I corrected. You just didn't respond. Logan stopped pacing. You blindsided us. I raised an eyebrow. Blindsided? You're the one who submitted a federal proposal without checking who your reviewer was. You sat through that dinner last night, my mother said, voice rising. Let us go on and on. Why didn't you say something? Because you weren't listening, I said simply. You haven't been listening for years. The room got quiet. Logan sank into the armchair near the door like his legs gave out. You've always been dramatic, my father muttered. Ever since you turned down the internship. This need to make a point. This isn't about drama, I said calmly. It's about reality. I didn't join the Coast Guard to spite you. I did it because it mattered to me, because it was mine. We built this company for our children, he snapped, to leave a legacy. Your legacy, I cut in. Not mine. He stared at me, unblinking. You're acting like we pushed you away. You didn't push me, I said. You erased me. You kept the version of me you liked, the high schooler with a 4.0, and ignored everything that came after. No one spoke. I took a slow breath, letting the weight of the truth settle. I've spent my entire adult life in uniform, serving in disasters, hurricanes, oil spills. I've spent nights in command centers, months on cutters, years building systems you all now have to comply with. And you still introduce me to people as the one who didn't go into business. My mother's face cracked just a little. We didn't mean to. I know, I said. But that's the problem. You never meant to hurt me. You just never thought I mattered. Logan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I thought you were doing field work. You know, chasing boats, that kind of thing. I almost laughed. No, Logan. I manage coastal infrastructure compliance for the Eastern Seaboard. I brief Congress. I sign off on contracts like yours. My father finally sat down, slow and stiff, like the anger had drained out of him. So what now? He asked. Now? I looked at him. Now I finish my job. I review your proposal fairly. I'll flag what needs fixing. If you meet the standards, you'll get the contract. If you don't, you won't. And after that? My mother asked softly. I looked at her, at Logan, then at the man who once told me I was wasting my potential. After that, I said, that's up to you. And for once, they had no response. I was halfway through reviewing another agency proposal the next afternoon when I saw the message pop up on my screen. Subject, lunch, from Logan Voss. That was a first. No sarcasm, no emoji, just those 2 words. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know if I even wanted to. But something about the way he'd looked yesterday, not humiliated, but humbled, made me pause. We met 2 days later at a quiet seafood place near the harbor. Neutral ground. Logan had already ordered a Coke when I arrived, and he stood when he saw me like we were strangers meeting for the first time. You look good, he said awkwardly, sitting back down. Thanks. The silence that followed was heavy, but not hostile. I wanted to say something the other day, he began, but I didn't want to say it in front of Dad. I raised an eyebrow. And what was that? He took a deep breath, eyes on the table. You were right. About all of it. I let that hang for a moment. He meant it. I could see that. There was no smugness, no defensiveness, just discomfort. I didn't understand what you actually did, he admitted. None of us did. I think we wanted to believe you were just doing busy work so we could feel better about ignoring it. Must be easier to feel superior when you don't ask questions, I said flatly. He winced. Yeah, it was. The waiter came and went. Neither of us touched our food. Logan leaned forward. I've read every word of the compliance review, twice. You didn't go easy on us, but you were fair. I respect that. I folded my arms, waiting. And, he added, we're implementing the revised protocol you suggested. The barge schedule update, the chain of command diagram. We already restructured based on your notes. That stopped me. I hadn't expected him to listen, much less act. You did the work? I asked. Yeah, he said, and I realized how much we've been pretending we know more than we do. I nodded slowly. That's called progress. He cracked a small smile. We sat in silence again, but it felt different this time. Not awkward, just open. Later that week, my mother called. Her voice was soft. No guilt, no condescension, just curiosity. I've been reading about your position, she said. I didn't understand how high up you were. I mean, deputy director? That's serious. It always was, I said gently. She paused. You know I never meant to ignore that. I know you didn't mean to, I said. But it still hurt. I'm sorry, she said. We got so caught up in the business, we missed the fact that you built something too. That night, my father stopped by the hotel I was staying at. No warning, just knocked on my door with a manila envelope in one hand and a strange look in his eyes. I brought the revised security protocol. I want your feedback. I scanned the document briefly. It was clean, precise, thorough. He stood there, uncertain, like he was waiting for permission to speak. I underestimated you, he said finally. I won't make that mistake again. I nodded. Let's see if we can start over, I said quietly. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like we just might. 6 months later, the harbor gleamed like it had been polished by sunlight itself. From my apartment window on the 12th floor, you could see the cranes swinging, the new scanning systems blinking along the dock, and a brand new drone station tucked beneath the outer pier. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Federally compliant, safely secured, and up and running on schedule. I'd just pulled a peach cobbler out of the oven when the buzzer rang. Logan arrived first, holding a bottle of wine and looking oddly relaxed in jeans. Is this okay? He asked, holding up the bottle. I figured you'd want something decent, not whatever Dad buys on sale. Big assumptions, I said, smiling, but I'll allow it. My mom came in next, clutching a pie dish under one arm and my elbow with the other. I made your favorite, she whispered, like it was a peace offering, cinnamon crust and everything. My dad followed last. He looked awkward standing in the foyer, holding something flat and wrapped in brown paper. This is for you, he said, offering it like it might bite him. I unwrapped it slowly. It was a newspaper article, the Fairhope Journal, framed neatly. Commander Voss oversees modernization success. Coast Guard partnership reduces port risk by 37%. I stared at it for a moment, fingers resting on the glass. You didn't have to frame it, I said. He nodded. I know, but I wanted to. Dinner was simple: pasta, salad, the pie. No dramatic speeches, no grand apologies, just quiet conversation and second helpings. For once, the weight wasn't there. No one talked over me. No one steered the conversation back to Port and Bay. We talked about normal things: hurricanes and drones, and Logan's new department manager, who apparently had a tendency to cry when overwhelmed. Reminds me of you in high school, I teased. Please, Logan groaned. That was allergies. After dinner, we moved to the living room. I poured the wine, and Logan stood awkwardly near the bookshelf. So, I implemented your barge protocol, he said. I looked up from the glasses. The one you wrote into the compliance revisions, he clarified. You know, with the staggered arrival scheduling and the offload rotation charts? And? I asked. He smiled, sheepish. It worked. Cleared backlog by 16%. We've been under the efficiency threshold for 3 weeks straight. I raised my glass slightly. Good. You followed the math. He rolled his eyes, but his smile stayed. Then my father cleared his throat. We all turned. He lifted his glass. To Commander Voss, he said, eyes on mine, who rose by forging her own current, and made us realize we'd been swimming in circles. My mother blinked fast. Logan gave a small nod. I sat back slowly, the wine warm in my hand. I didn't need their recognition. I hadn't needed it for years. But sitting there, in my apartment, on my terms, not at their table, not in their office, I felt something shift. Not because they finally saw me, but because they saw me clearly. Not as the daughter who left, not as the sister who made things hard, but as a woman who carved out her own path and invited them in. Only once she knew they'd respect the ground she stood on. And they did.